The conversation surrounding The Young and the Restless has grown increasingly uneasy in recent weeks as concerns about declining viewership refuse to fade. What once felt like isolated fluctuations tied to holidays or short-term scheduling disruptions now appears to be a deeper, more sustained erosion of audience engagement. For many longtime fans, the anxiety does not stem solely from numbers on a ratings chart but from what those numbers represent. A slow but unmistakable weakening of the bond between the show and the viewers who have supported it for decades. The troubling reality is that a noticeable portion of the remaining audience is no longer tuning in out of love, anticipation, or emotional investment, but rather out of habit or worse. Out of frustration, watching not to be moved but to criticize what they perceive as missed opportunities and creative stagnation. Reports indicating a sharp drop in total viewership over the past month have only intensified this sense of alarm. While ratings declines are not unfamiliar territory for daytime television in general, the scale and persistence of the downturn have sparked conversations that go far beyond routine concern. Fans are increasingly asking whether the show is merely experiencing a temporary slump or whether it is facing a more structural problem rooted in storytelling choices, pacing issues, and a growing disconnect between the narrative direction and audience expectations. In online discussions, one recurring theme emerges with striking clarity. Many viewers feel that the emotional payoff they once relied on has been replaced by repetitive cycles of conflict that rarely lead to meaningful resolution. Instead of long-form arcs that reward patience, the show often appears to circle the same emotional beats without fully committing to change, leaving viewers exhausted rather than intrigued. This situation raises uncomfortable but unavoidable questions about the future of the series. If viewership continues to slide without meaningful intervention, the consequences could extend far beyond a few nervous weeks of ratings analysis. In the television industry, sustained declines inevitably trigger cost-benefit calculations, and daytime dramas despite their legacy are not immune to those realities. Producers may eventually be forced to consider budget reductions, scaled-back production ambitions, or, in a more drastic scenario, a reduction in the number of new episodes produced each season. Such outcomes would not merely affect behind-the-scenes logistics, they would fundamentally alter the rhythm and presence of the show in viewers' daily lives, transforming a once reliable fixture into something less expansive and less emotionally immersive. For fans who grew up with Genoa City as a constant backdrop to their lives, the implications feel deeply personal. A reduction in episodes would almost certainly mean fewer appearances by cornerstone characters such as Victor Newman and Adam Newman. Figures whose complex histories and moral ambiguities have long served as the engine of the show's most compelling drama. These characters are not simply plot devices, they are narrative anchors, carrying decades of emotional weight and audience memory. To imagine a version of the show where their presence is diminished is, for many fans, to imagine a version of The Young and the Restless that no longer feels like the series they fell in love with. The fear is not just about seeing less of these characters, but about losing the layered storytelling that once made their struggles resonate so powerfully. Social media has become the primary outlet for these anxieties, and the tone of fan commentary reflects a mixture of frustration, resignation, and guarded hope. Some viewers argue that short-term ratings spikes often tied to holiday programming or promotional events should not be mistaken for genuine recovery. What the show needs, they insist, is not a brief surge in curiosity but a sustained upward trend driven by consistent storytelling improvements. One widely echoed sentiment suggests that without a long-term strategy to reverse the decline, even the most loyal fans may begin to disengage, not out of spite but out of emotional fatigue. The idea that the creative leadership could be affected by prolonged ratings weakness has also entered the conversation, with some fans openly speculating about job security behind the scenes if the downward trajectory continues unchecked. At the heart of these discussions lies a deeper concern about identity. The Young and the Restless has always thrived on its ability to balance legacy with evolution, honoring its history while adapting to changing audience sensibilities. When that balance falters, the show risks alienating both longtime viewers and potential new audiences. Longtime fans may feel that the emotional complexity they once cherished has been diluted, while newer viewers may struggle to find an entry point into storylines that feel insular or overly reliant on past conflicts. The challenge, then, is not simply to stop the ratings decline but to reassert a clear creative vision that reminds audiences why Genoa City once felt so alive, so unpredictable, and so emotionally rewarding. Ultimately, the current ratings downturn serves as a warning rather than a verdict. It signals that the show is at a crossroads, facing a moment where complacency could prove costly, but thoughtful reinvention could restore confidence and engagement. Fans are not asking for miracles, they are asking for intention, for stories that take risks and commit to their consequences, and for characters who are allowed to grow rather than endlessly reset. Whether the producers choose to heed that call remains to be seen, but one truth is undeniable: if meaningful changes do not arrive soon, the fear is not just that viewers will continue to drift away, but that the cultural legacy of The Young and the Restless may begin to fade in ways that no ratings chart can fully capture. Concerns about declining viewership continue to intensify around The Young and the Restless. And what was once dismissed as temporary ratings turbulence is now being openly framed by fans and critics as a symptom of deeper structural problems within the show. The conversation has shifted noticeably in tone, moving away from cautious worry toward blunt disillusionment. Increasingly, long-time viewers are no longer questioning whether the audience is shrinking, but whether the series still deserves the audience it has left. One particularly biting assessment circulating online captures this mood with brutal clarity, arguing that the show does not merit its current viewership at all and that what remains is sustained largely by loyalty rather than enjoyment. According to this perspective, the audience has aged alongside the show, and while that loyalty has delayed a steeper collapse, it is not an infinite resource. As time passes, even devotion rooted in decades of habit risks fading, especially if the series continues to give viewers little reason to stay emotionally invested. This frustration is compounded by the perception that the show's creative stagnation has become impossible to ignore. Critics increasingly point to the repetitive nature of daily storytelling, where much of the action unfolds in the same limited set of locations, most notably Crimson Lights, Society, and the Athletic Club. What should feel like a living, breathing city instead comes across as a closed loop, with characters endlessly cycling between familiar rooms, engaging in conversations that rarely propel the story forward in meaningful ways. A so-called normal workday in Genoa City, as one critic sarcastically noted, seems to consist of little more than moving from one coffee shop to another, from one restaurant booth to the next, without any tangible sense of progression or consequence. This lack of narrative momentum has led some viewers to conclude that the show's talented cast is being fundamentally underserved by the material they are given, their abilities obscured rather than showcased by scripts that fail to challenge them emotionally or dramatically. The criticism cuts even deeper when it comes to long-term writing quality. Many fans argue that the decline did not happen overnight but has been unfolding gradually for years, eroding trust one storyline at a time. The much-maligned Aristotle Dumas arc is frequently cited as a turning point. Initially teased as a complex and intriguing mystery, but ultimately revealed to be cane in a twist that left many viewers feeling manipulated rather than rewarded. For some, this storyline symbolized a broader problem: the tendency to overpromise intrigue and underdeliver substance. That frustration has only grown with more recent plot developments, including what critics describe as an increasingly absurd escalation into territory that strains credibility, such as the controversial storyline involving an eye-driven attack orchestrated by Victor Newman. While Victor has always been portrayed as powerful and ruthless, many viewers argue that pushing his character into overtly illegal and technologically implausible schemes undermines the grounded psychological realism that once defined his menace. Instead of complex moral ambiguity, the story risks tipping into caricature, alienating viewers who expect sophistication rather than shock for its own sake. What makes the situation more unsettling for fans is the silence from the production team. To date, the producers of The Young and the Restless have offered no public response to the mounting criticism or the widely discussed ratings decline. This absence of acknowledgement has only fueled speculation and resentment, as viewers wonder whether their concerns are being taken seriously behind the scenes or dismissed as background noise. In an era where audience engagement and feedback are more visible than ever, silence can feel less like neutrality and more like indifference. For a show built on the emotional loyalty of its audience, that perception carries significant risk. Fans who feel unheard are far more likely to disengage than those who believe their criticism might lead to meaningful change. The implications of continued ratings erosion are difficult to ignore. Sustained declines inevitably prompt difficult conversations within television networks about cost, efficiency, and long-term viability. While daytime dramas have historically enjoyed a degree of insulation due to their loyal audiences and relatively low production costs compared to primetime programming, they are not immune to economic realities. If viewership continues to fall, the pressure to consider budget reductions, creative restructuring, or even fewer new episodes per season will only increase. Such measures would fundamentally alter the scale and ambition of the show, potentially creating a self-perpetuating cycle in which reduced resources lead to even weaker storytelling, further accelerating audience loss. For many fans, the most painful aspect of this possibility is what it would mean for the world of Genoa City itself. Characters like Victor Newman, Adam Newman, and the extended web of relationships that have defined the show for generations are not easily replaceable. They represent continuity, history, and emotional investment accumulated over decades. The idea that these characters might appear less frequently, or that their stories could be compressed or sidelined due to production constraints, feels like an erosion of the show's identity. It is not merely about screen time but about the loss of narrative depth that once allowed these characters to evolve, clash, and surprise viewers in meaningful ways. At its core, the current crisis facing The Young and the Restless is not solely about numbers on a ratings chart but about trust between the show and its audience. Viewers are not demanding perfection, nor are they rejecting change outright. What they are asking for is intentional storytelling that respects their intelligence and emotional investment. They want arcs that build toward genuine consequences, dialogue that reveals character rather than filling time, and a willingness to let stories breathe instead of endlessly resetting them. Without such changes, loyalty alone may no longer be enough to sustain the show, particularly as generational shifts reduce the size of the traditional daytime audience. For now, The Young and the Restless continues to air on weekdays on CBS, maintaining its place on the schedule even as questions swirl about its creative direction and future stability. Local listings still mark its familiar time slot, a reminder of the show's enduring presence in American television history, yet beneath that surface continuity lies a growing sense of uncertainty. Whether the producers will choose to confront the criticism head-on, recalibrate their storytelling approach, and attempt to rebuild viewer confidence remains to be seen. What is clear is that without meaningful change, the decline in viewership risks becoming not just a trend, but a defining chapter in the long and storied legacy of The Young and the Restless.